The priest asked if anyone objected to this union, and from the back of the church a woman's voice rang out like a gunshot. I object. She's a fraud, and he's mine. My heart should have shattered in that moment, but instead, a cold smile touched my lips. They had no idea what was coming. Before the story begins, please leave us a comment telling us which state or city you are watching from. Do not forget to like and subscribe so this channel can grow and bring you more exciting stories. That morning had started with the kind of sunshine that makes you believe in new beginnings, the kind of light that streams through windows and makes dust particles look like tiny stars floating in the air. I stood in the bridal suite of the historic church, looking at myself in the full-length mirror, and barely recognized the woman staring back. My name is Evangeline, and I was about to marry a man I had known for 3 years. A man I had loved. A man who had betrayed me in the cruelest way possible. But he didn't know that I knew. The dress I wore was custom-made, a cascade of ivory silk and Belgian lace that had cost more than most people's cars. My dark hair was arranged in an intricate updo, threaded with tiny diamonds that caught the light with every movement. I looked like a bride. I looked happy. I looked like a woman in love. All of it was a lie. My maid of honor, Paloma, was fussing with my veil, her face glowing with excitement. She had been my best friend since college, the kind of friend who knows all your secrets, who has held your hair back when you were sick and held your hand when you were scared. She knew what I was about to do. She was the only one who knew. "You look stunning, Evangeline," she whispered, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "Are you sure about this? Are you absolutely sure?" I nodded once, sharp and definitive. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The groom's name was Dashiell Thornfield. Even his name sounded like old money and privilege, which was fitting because that's exactly what he was. Tall, handsome in that aristocratic way, with dark hair that always fell just perfectly across his forehead, and eyes the color of expensive whiskey. We had met at a charity gala 3 years ago. I was there representing the nonprofit I worked for. He was there because his family's name was on the building. He had approached me with a champagne flute in hand and a smile that could melt glaciers, and within 10 minutes, he had me laughing. Within a month, he had me in love. Within 6 months, he had proposed. And I had said yes, because I believed him when he said I was the only woman he had ever truly loved. I believed him when he said he wanted to build a life with me. I believed every word that came out of his beautiful, lying mouth. The truth had revealed itself 6 weeks ago, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I had left work early, feeling under the weather, and decided to surprise Dashiell at his downtown office. I had brought soup from his favorite bistro, thinking I would be the thoughtful fiancé, the caring partner. I used the key card he had given me to access his private floor. The receptionist wasn't at her desk. The hallway was quiet, just the hum of expensive air conditioning and the muted sound of a city far below. I walked to his office door and heard voices inside. One was definitely Dashiell's, that smooth baritone I had fallen asleep listening to countless times. The other was a woman's voice, sultry and confident. I should have knocked. I should have announced myself. Instead, I stood there, frozen, as I heard my fiancé tell another woman that he loved her, that he had always loved her. That marrying me was just a business arrangement his family insisted on. But that she, this mystery woman, was his real future. His real love. I stood in that hallway for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, listening to them plan their life together. A life that would begin after he married me, after he secured his inheritance, after he had access to the trust fund that only became available upon marriage. I was a key to a vault, nothing more. When I finally walked away, my hands were shaking so badly I dropped the soup. It splattered across the marble floor of the hallway, tomato bisque spreading like blood. I didn't clean it up. I just left. That night, when Dashiell came home to our shared penthouse apartment, I pretended everything was fine. I smiled when he kissed me. I laughed at his stories about his day. I didn't mention that I knew what his afternoon had really contained. I didn't mention that I knew about her. Instead, I started planning. Over the next 6 weeks, I became a detective of my own life. I hired a private investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Octavia who came highly recommended and asked no questions about why a bride-to-be would want her groom followed. The photos Octavia brought me were damning. Dashiell and his mistress at expensive restaurants. Dashiell and his mistress entering hotels. Dashiell and his mistress kissing in parking garages, thinking they were hidden. The mistress's name was Seraphine. She was beautiful in that calculated way, all blonde highlights and designer clothes. She worked as a marketing executive at a firm that, as I discovered, did a lot of business with Dashiell's family company. They had known each other for 5 years. They had been sleeping together for 4. Their entire relationship predated mine. I dug deeper. I accessed bank records, which was easier than it should have been, since Dashiell had insisted we open a joint account to pay for wedding expenses. I found transfers to Seraphine, thousands of dollars at a time, gifts, trips, an apartment in her name that he was paying for. My money. Our joint money. Money I had contributed from my salary, thinking we were building a future together. I contacted a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but the best divorce attorney in the city, a woman named Isadora, who had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless. I know we're not married yet, I told her in our first meeting. But when we are, I need to be prepared. She had looked at me with newfound respect. Smart, she said, very smart. Tell me everything. I told her about the prenuptial agreement Dashiell had insisted on, the one his lawyers had drawn up that heavily favored him. I told her about the evidence I had gathered. I told her about the inheritance he would receive upon marriage, about the trust fund, about all the financial details I had quietly documented. Isadora leaned back in her chair, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. You know what you're doing here, don't you? You're going to let him marry you, let him access that trust fund, and then you're going to take him for everything he's got. Not everything, I corrected. Just what's fair, just what I'm entitled to. Just enough to make sure he understands what it costs to treat another human being like a stepping stone. She nodded approvingly. I'll have everything ready. The moment you say the word, we move. But there was one more thing I needed to do, one more piece of the puzzle I needed to arrange. I needed Seraphine at the wedding. I needed her to show her hand, to reveal herself publicly, to make a scene that would be witnessed by everyone. Because Dashiell's family cared about one thing above all else: reputation. Old money families always do. A public scandal would be devastating. So I had Paloma send an anonymous message to Seraphine, time to arrive the morning of the wedding. It was simple, just a few lines. He's marrying her today. 3:00 at St. Michael's Cathedral. If you love him, stop this. Don't let him throw away what you have for a marriage of convenience. He's only marrying her for money. I knew Seraphine's type. She was possessive, impulsive, dramatic. She wouldn't be able to resist. She would come. She would make a scene, and everything I had planned would fall into place. Now, standing in the bridal suite with Paloma putting the final touches on my appearance, I felt strangely calm. The storm was coming, but I was ready for it. It's time, Paloma said softly. The music is starting. I took one last look at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back was composed, beautiful, and utterly in control. I picked up my bouquet, white roses and lilies, and walked toward my future. The cathedral was magnificent, all soaring ceilings and stained glass windows that threw colored light across the assembled guests. There were easily 300 people there, Dashiell's side of the church packed with society figures and business associates, my side more modest, but filled with people who actually cared about me. The organ began to play, and I started my walk down the aisle. I had chosen to walk alone, no father to give me away. My father had died when I was young, and I had refused to have anyone stand in for him. I was giving myself to this marriage, on my own terms, for my own reasons. Dashiell stood at the altar, looking handsome in his custom tuxedo. His groomsmen flanked him, all polished and proper. When he saw me, his face lit up with what looked like genuine love. Maybe he did love me in his own way, or maybe he was just a very good actor. I walked slowly, savoring each step, watching the faces of the guests as I passed. Some looked happy, some looked envious, some looked bored. None of them had any idea what was about to happen. When I reached the altar, Dashiell took my hand. His palm was warm, his grip confident. He leaned close and whispered, "You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." I smiled at him, and in that smile was everything I knew, everything I had discovered, everything I had planned. But he didn't see it. He only saw what he wanted to see. The priest began the ceremony. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony." The words washed over me like waves. I had heard them countless times in movies, at other people's weddings, but hearing them said about me felt surreal. This ceremony, this moment, it was all theater now. A play I was directing toward a very specific conclusion. The priest droned on about love and commitment, about the sacred bonds of marriage, about forsaking all others. At that part, I saw Dashiell's jaw tighten slightly. Good. He should feel uncomfortable. He should feel the weight of the vows he was about to break. "If anyone has any reason why these two should not be wed," the priest intoned, "speak now or forever hold your peace." This was the moment. I held my breath, waiting. The cathedral was silent for a heartbeat, 2 heartbeats, 3. And then, from the back of the church, I heard the sound of a door opening, heavy oak scraping against stone, footsteps clicking against marble, and then her voice, clear and furious, echoing through the sacred space. I object. Every head in the cathedral turned. The collective gasp of 300 people created a sound like wind rushing through trees. At the back of the church stood Seraphine, looking like an avenging angel in a tight red dress that was absolutely inappropriate for a church. Her blonde hair was wild, her makeup smudged as if she had been crying. She looked unhinged, perfect. "She's a fraud," Seraphine screamed, pointing at me with a shaking finger. "And he's mine. He loves me. He's always loved me. This whole wedding is a sham." The congregation erupted. People were standing, craning to see who was causing the disruption. Dashiell's face had gone white, then red, cycling through emotions faster than I could track. Horror, anger, panic, all of it playing across his features in rapid succession. "Seraphine," he said, his voice strangled. "What are you doing? What am I doing?" She shrieked, starting to walk down the aisle toward us. "What am I doing? I'm saving you from making the biggest mistake of your life. You don't love her. You love me. You told me yourself. This marriage is just for your family's money." Security, 2 large men in suits, moved to intercept Seraphine, but I held up my hand. "Wait," I said, my voice calm and clear. "Let her speak." Everyone turned to look at me, shock written across their faces. Dashiell grabbed my arm. "Evangeline, this is insane. She's insane. Don't listen to her." "Is she?" I asked, turning to face him fully. "Is she really insane, Dashiell, or is she telling the truth?" His eyes widened. He finally saw it, the knowledge in my gaze, the trap closing around him. "You knew," he whispered. I smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "I've known for 6 weeks." Seraphine had reached the front of the church now, security uncertain whether to grab her or not. She was looking between Dashiell and me, confusion starting to replace her righteous anger. "Tell her," Seraphine demanded, looking at Dashiell. "Tell her about us. Tell her that you're only marrying her because your grandmother's trust fund requires you to be married. Tell her that you don't love her." Dashiell looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him. The entire cathedral was silent, waiting. Every phone was probably recording this. By tonight, this would be viral. The scandal would be complete. I turned to address the crowd, projecting my voice the way I had learned in the theater classes I took in college. "She's right," I announced, "about most of it anyway. Dashiell is marrying me primarily for access to his trust fund. A trust fund worth approximately $40 million that becomes available only upon his marriage." Another collective gasp rippled through the crowd. I saw Dashiell's mother, a severe woman in expensive pearls, clutch at her chest. His father's face had turned purple. I continued, my voice steady. "What Seraphine doesn't know is that I've known about their affair for weeks. I've documented it extensively. I have photographs, financial records, and testimony from witnesses. I know about the apartment Dashiell rents for her in the Carlisle building. I know about the trips to Bermuda, to Paris, to Cabo. I know about every lie he's told both of us. Seraphine's face crumbled. She looked at Dashiell. You rented me an apartment? I thought you owned it. You said you owned it. Dashiell said nothing. There was nothing he could say. Everything was unraveling exactly as I had orchestrated. I pulled a folded document from inside my bouquet. I had hidden it there this morning, wrapped in plastic, to protect it from the flower stems. I handed it to the priest, who took it automatically, looking confused. This is a legal document, I explained, still addressing the crowd like I was giving a performance. It's a post-nuptial agreement, already signed by me and witnessed by my attorney. It states that in the event of infidelity, the betrayed spouse is entitled to 75% of all marital assets, including any trust funds accessed during the marriage. Dashiell lunged for the document, but the priest pulled it back. The old man looked at me with something like awe. You planned this, he said, all of this. I inclined my head. I believe in being prepared, Father. Dashiell found his voice, and it came out as a roar. This is insane. You can't do this. I haven't even signed that document. It's not valid. You're right, I said calmly. You haven't signed it. But here's the thing, Dashiell. I'm giving you a choice. You can sign it now, marry me, and we can proceed with this farce. You'll get access to your trust fund, I'll get security, and we'll both know exactly where we stand. Or you can refuse, we'll call off this wedding, and you can walk away with nothing. Well, not nothing. You'll still have Seraphine. I turned to look at her. She was crying now, mascara running down her face. She looked at Dashiell like he was a stranger. You used me, she said softly. This whole time you were just using me. Dashiell's hands were clenched into fists at his sides. The congregation watched in absolute silence. This was better than any reality TV show, more dramatic than any soap opera. This was real life falling apart in spectacular fashion. Think carefully, I told Dashiell. Your family's reputation is already damaged by this scene. The video of your mistress objecting at your wedding is probably already being uploaded to social media. The scandal is done. It's happening. You can't stop that. But you can still salvage the financial aspect. Marry me under my terms, or walk away with nothing and spend years in court fighting your family for access to money they won't want to give you after this humiliation. I could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. He was weighing his options, trying to find a way out, trying to see a path that didn't end with him losing. There wasn't one. I had made sure of that. Dashiell's father stood up from his seat in the front row. Son, he said, his voice hard as granite, you will not sign that document. This wedding is over. You've embarrassed this family enough. I looked at Dashiell's father, a man who had always treated me with polite condescension, as if I wasn't quite good enough for his precious son. With all due respect, sir, I said, my voice sweet as honey and sharp as glass. Your son accessed his trust fund 3 days ago. The moment our marriage license was filed, the funds became available. He's already withdrawn $10 million. The cathedral erupted again. Dashiell's mother actually screamed. His father's face went from purple to an alarming shade of crimson. Dashiell himself stumbled backward, as if I had physically struck him. How did you, he started, but couldn't finish. I smiled. You made me a joint account holder for wedding expenses, remember? I had access to all your accounts. I've been monitoring everything. The $10 million you withdrew? It's in our joint account right now. If you refuse to marry me, if we don't go through with this ceremony, that money becomes contested. My lawyers will argue that it was withdrawn in anticipation of marriage, that it's a marital asset. We'll be in court for years. Years, Dashiell. And your family will love that, won't they? All that publicity, all that scrutiny of the family finances. Dashiell looked at his father, then at Seraphine, then back at me. I could see the exact moment he realized he had been outplayed. You're a monster, he whispered. No, I corrected. I'm someone who learned not to be a victim. There's a difference. Seraphine was backing away, shaking her head. I can't believe this, any of this. Dashiell, I loved you. I actually loved you. She turned and ran down the aisle, her heels clicking frantically against the marble. The heavy doors of the cathedral slammed behind her, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Silence fell again. Every eye was on Dashiell and me, waiting to see what would happen next. I pulled a pen from my bouquet, Another item I had hidden there this morning. I held it out to him. Sign, I said simply, or don't. But decide now. We're not keeping 300 people waiting forever. Dashiell took the pen with shaking hands. He looked at the document, at the terms that would bind him to me and give me control over the majority of his newly accessed fortune. He looked at his parents, both of whom were staring at him with expressions of horror and disgust. He looked at me, and in his eyes was pure hatred. Good. Let him hate me. I had loved him once, truly loved him, and he had crushed that love without a second thought. His hatred was nothing compared to the betrayal I had endured. He signed the document. His signature was jagged, angry, but it was legal. The priest witnessed it, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. I folded the document carefully and handed it to Paloma, who had been standing to the side, watching everything with wide eyes. She took it and tucked it safely into her clutch. Now, I said, turning back to the priest, where were we? The priest stared at me. You want to continue? I do, I said, and there was iron in my voice. I've come this far. I'm seeing it through. The priest looked at Dashiell, who nodded once, a sharp, defeated movement. Very well, the priest said, though he sounded deeply uncertain. He cleared his throat and addressed the congregation, most of whom were still standing, still in shock. If everyone could please be seated, we will continue with the ceremony. The guests sat slowly, a rustling of expensive fabric and whispered confusion. This was unprecedented. This was insane. This was the wedding that would be talked about for years. The priest rushed through the rest of the ceremony. The vows were spoken in monotone, Dashiell's voice flat and lifeless, mine clear and steady. When it came time to exchange rings, Dashiell's hand shook so badly he nearly dropped mine. I slid his ring onto his finger with perfect calm. By the power vested in me, the priest said, sounding relieved to be reaching the end, I now pronounce you husband and wife. He paused, then added almost reluctantly, You may kiss the bride. Dashiell looked at me with loathing. I smiled at him, sweet and terrible. He leaned in and gave me the briefest, coldest kiss imaginable. It was nothing. A brush of lips, meaningless and hollow. Perfect. When we turned to face the congregation as husband and wife, the applause was scattered and uncertain. Most people just stared. Some were already leaving, scandalized and unable to deal with what they had witnessed. Dashiell's parents were among those heading for the exits, his mother in tears, his father's face set in fury. As we walked back down the aisle, Dashiell's grip on my arm was bruising. Through gritted teeth, he hissed, I will make your life hell for this. I looked up at him, my smile never wavering. You already tried that, darling. Didn't work out so well for you, did it? We emerged from the cathedral into bright sunshine. The photographer, who looked utterly bewildered, mechanically took photos of us on the steps. Dashiell and I, the happy couple, smiling for the camera. Only my smile was real. The reception was a disaster, as I had known it would be. The venue was a historic mansion with sprawling gardens, everything elegant and expensive, but the atmosphere was funeral. Half the guests never showed up, having fled the cathedral in shock. Those who did attend stood in clusters, whispering furiously, watching Dashiell and me like we were exhibits in a zoo. Dashiell drank, heavily. By the time dinner was served, he was slurring his words. I sipped champagne and made polite conversation with the few guests brave enough to approach me. Most looked at me with a mixture of fear and fascination. I had become something dangerous in their eyes, something unpredictable. Good. People should know I wasn't someone to be trifled with. During the dinner, while servers brought out course after course of food that no one was really eating, Paloma leaned close to me. You really did it, she whispered. You actually went through with it. I told you I would, I replied. Now comes the interesting part. The interesting part began the very next morning. I had spent the wedding night in the bridal suite of a luxury hotel, alone. Dashiell had disappeared after the reception, and I hadn't bothered to find out where. Probably drinking himself into oblivion somewhere, or crawling back to Seraphine to explain how his wife had destroyed both of them. I woke early, showered, dressed in a sharp business suit, and met with Isadora at her office. She was already there, paperwork spread across her conference table. looking like a general planning a war. "Mrs. Thornfield," she said with a slight smile, "how does it feel to be married?" "Like winning," I replied. "Good," she said, "because now the real work begins." Over the next 3 hours, Isadora explained exactly what we were going to do. The post-nuptial agreement I had gotten Dashiell to sign was just the beginning. Now we needed to document everything, build an airtight case for when I filed for divorce. "We're going to wait 3 months," Isadora explained. "Long enough for the marriage to be established, for finances to be fully commingled. Then you file for divorce on grounds of adultery, and you take him for everything the post-nup entitles you to." "What about his family?" I asked. "Won't they fight this?" "Let them fight," Isadora said coldly. "Their son signed a legal document in front of 300 witnesses and a priest. He signed it of his own free will, no coercion." Yes, the circumstances were unusual, but nothing about the signing was illegal. They can tie us up in court for a while, but ultimately, you'll win. "And the publicity?" "They'll hate that," Isadora said with satisfaction. "Old money families like the Thornfields live and die by their reputations. The more they fight, the more press this gets, the worse they look. My guess is, they'll settle quickly and quietly to make you go away." I nodded. That was what I was counting on. I didn't actually want to destroy Dashiell completely. I wasn't cruel, despite what he might think. I just wanted justice. I wanted him to understand that actions have consequences, that you can't use people and discard them without paying a price. The next 3 months were strange. Dashiell and I lived together in his penthouse apartment, but we might as well have been on different planets. We slept in separate bedrooms. We barely spoke. When we did have to interact, at family dinners or social events, his family insisted we attend to maintain appearances. We played our roles, the devoted newlyweds, the happy couple. Everyone knew it was a farce, but the Thornfields valued appearances above all else. During this time, I continued working at my nonprofit job. I didn't need to work anymore, not with access to Dashiell's money, but I liked my job. I liked helping people. And I liked having something that was mine, separate from all of this. I also continued gathering evidence. Every time Dashiell left the apartment, Octavia followed him. Every time he met with Seraphine, and he did, frequently, we documented it. Photos, videos, witness statements. By the end of 3 months, I had a file an inch thick detailing his ongoing affair. On the 91st day of our marriage, I had Isadora file the divorce papers. Dashiell was served at his office in front of his colleagues. I wanted him to feel the same humiliation I had felt, standing in that hallway listening to him plan a future with another woman. His lawyer contacted Isadora within hours. They wanted to negotiate. Good. That meant they knew they would lose if this went to trial. The negotiations took 2 weeks, back and forth, offers and counteroffers. The Thornfields tried to invoke the prenuptial agreement, but Isadora shut that down immediately. "The postnup supersedes it," she explained in a conference call I listened in on. "And the postnup is crystal clear. 75% of marital assets in the event of adultery, which we have documented extensively. In the end, they settled. I got $30 million. 75% of the $40 million Dashiell had accessed from his trust fund. The house we had purchased together, which I didn't want, went back to him. The cars, the art, all the material possessions he could keep. I just wanted the money. Money that would ensure I would never be dependent on anyone again. Money that I could use to expand my nonprofit, to help other people, to build something meaningful. The divorce was finalized on a rainy Tuesday, exactly 4 months after our wedding. I signed the papers in Isadora's office, my signature steady and sure. "Congratulations," Isadora said when it was done. "You're free." "I am," I agreed. I walked out of that office building into the rain, letting it wash over me. I felt lighter than I had in months. The weight of anger, of betrayal, of the careful planning and execution of my revenge, all of it lifted away. I had won. Not just financially, though, that was certainly satisfying. I had won because I had refused to be a victim. I had taken control of my own narrative. I had turned Dashiell's betrayal into my liberation. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, I was having coffee at a small cafe near my apartment when someone approached my table. I looked up and was shocked to see Seraphine. She looked different than she had at the wedding. Smaller somehow, less polished. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her makeup minimal. She looked tired. "Can I sit?" she asked. I gestured to the empty chair across from me. She sat, ordered a coffee from the passing waiter, and then we sat in silence for a moment. "I wanted to apologize," she finally said, "for what happened at the wedding. I shouldn't have come. I shouldn't have made that scene." "You did exactly what I expected you to do," I replied. "I sent you that message knowing you would come, knowing you would object. I needed you there." She looked up sharply. "You sent that message?" I nodded. "I needed Dashiell's betrayal to be public. I needed witnesses. You provided that." She let out a bitter laugh. "So I was being used too, by both of you." "I suppose you were," I agreed. "But if it helps, I think he did love you. In his way. He's just incapable of putting anyone's needs above his own." Seraphine's coffee arrived. She wrapped her hands around the mug like she was cold. "He called me after the divorce," she said. "Wanted to get back together. Said now that he was free, we could finally be together properly. I'm guessing you said no." She nodded. I finally saw him clearly. "What you said at the wedding, about him using both of us, it was true. I was just a secret, a rebellion against his family. He never had any intention of actually being with me." She took a sip of her coffee. "I lost my job," she continued. "The scandal was too much for the firm. They asked me to resign quietly." "I'm sorry," I said, "and I meant it." She shrugged. "It's probably for the best. I was sleeping with a client anyway. Huge conflict of interest. I'm looking at it as an opportunity to start over." We sat in companionable silence for a few minutes. Two women who had both been hurt by the same man, who had both been used, now sitting together in a coffee shop like old friends. It was surreal. "I'm starting a new nonprofit," I told her, "focused on financial literacy and legal advocacy for women leaving bad relationships, women who need resources to get out safely, to understand their rights. If you're looking for work, I could use someone with your marketing background." She looked at me in surprise. "You'd hire me? After everything?" "You were a victim too," I said, "just in a different way. And I think you could help a lot of women avoid the mistakes we both made." She smiled, really smiled for the first time since sitting down. "I'd like that." We exchanged numbers, talked for another hour about the nonprofit, about our lives, about how we were both moving forward. When we parted ways, I felt something close to peace. As for Dashiell, I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had been cut off by his family. The scandal had been too much, the embarrassment too great. His father had removed him from any position of authority in the family business. His mother refused to take his calls. He was living off what remained of the trust fund money he had managed to keep, which wasn't much after the divorce settlement and legal fees. I should have felt satisfaction at his downfall. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt sad. Sad that it had come to this. Sad that he had thrown away something real for money and status. Sad that he would probably never understand the damage he had caused. But that sadness didn't consume me. It was just a small ache, a remnant of the love I had once felt for him. It would fade with time. Everything fades with time. 6 months after the divorce, I ran into Dashiell at a gallery opening. We both froze when we saw each other. For a moment I thought he might turn and leave, but he didn't. He walked over to me. "Evangeline," he said. His voice was quiet, uncertain. "Dashiell." We stood there awkwardly, two people who had shared a name, a home, a marriage, however brief and false. "How are you?" he finally asked. "I'm well," I replied. "Better than well, actually. I'm happy." He nodded, looking down at his shoes. They were expensive still, but not as expensive as the ones he used to wear. "I heard about your nonprofit," he said, "the one helping women leave bad relationships. That's good. That's really good, thank you." Another silence, heavy with everything unsaid. "I'm sorry," he finally said, and when I looked at his face, I saw that he meant it. For all of it, for lying to you, for using you, for everything. I thought I could have it all, you know. The money, the status, the woman I loved, and the wife I needed for appearances. I was an idiot. Yes, I said simply. You were. He let out a shocked laugh at my bluntness. I deserved that. You deserved a lot more than what you got, I told him. You could have had a real marriage, a real partner. I would have loved you, Dashiell. I did love you, but you threw that way for money you didn't even get to keep. I know, he said quietly. I know. I looked at the man I had married and divorced in the space of 4 months, the man who had betrayed me and whom I had destroyed in return. I felt nothing for him now. No love, no hate, just a distant recognition. I hope you figure out what actually matters to you, I said, before it's too late. With that, I walked away. I didn't look back. There was nothing behind me worth seeing. I focused on what was ahead. The nonprofit was thriving. Seraphine had joined the team and was brilliant at outreach and communications. We had helped dozens of women already, providing them with legal resources, financial planning, safe housing. We had turned our pain into purpose. Paloma and I met for brunch every Sunday, a tradition we had started during the darkest days of my planning. She told me once, over mimosas and eggs Benedict, that she had never been more proud of anyone in her life. You could have just walked away, she said. When you found out about the affair, you could have just ended the engagement and moved on. Why didn't you? Because walking away would have left him with everything, I explained. His money, his reputation, his freedom to hurt someone else. I wanted him to understand that actions have consequences. I wanted justice. Revenge, you mean, Paloma said with a slight smile. Justice, revenge? I shrugged. Sometimes they're the same thing. She raised her mimosa glass. To justice, then. To justice, I agreed, clinking my glass against hers. A year after the wedding that had shocked a city, I was sitting in my office when I received an unexpected email. It was from Dashiell's mother, a woman who had frozen me out completely after the scandal. The email was brief and formal, but the meaning was clear. She wanted to meet. I debated ignoring it. I owed the Thornfield family nothing. But curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed to have coffee with her. We met at a high-end hotel restaurant, all white tablecloths and silver service. She was waiting when I arrived, looking as imperious as ever in her pearls and designer suit. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, I replied honestly. I want to apologize, she said, and I nearly fell out of my chair in shock. This woman had never apologized for anything in her life. For my son's behavior, she continued, and for my own. I treated you as if you weren't good enough for our family, when the truth is, you were too good for us. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. She continued, I raised my son to believe that money and status were the most important things in life, that love was secondary, that marriage was a transaction. I see now what that cost him, what it cost you. It cost me a lot, I agreed, but I recovered. She smiled slightly. Yes, you did. More than recovered. You thrived. You took the worst thing that happened to you and turned it into something good. That takes strength. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I want you to know that not all of us are like Dashiell, she said. Some of us are capable of learning from our mistakes, and because I want to donate to your nonprofit. A substantial amount. I'd like to help you help other women. I studied her face, looking for deception, for an ulterior motive, but all I saw was a woman who had watched her son destroy himself and was trying, in her limited way, to make amends. I can't accept money with strings attached, I said carefully. No strings, she promised, just a mother trying to do some good in the world. She paused, then added more quietly, I loved my son. I still do. But I don't like him very much right now. Maybe this will help me feel like the Thornfield name stands for something other than scandal. We talked for another hour. She wrote a check that made my eyes widen, enough to fund the nonprofit for 2 years. When we parted ways, she shook my hand formally. You're a remarkable woman, Evangeline. My son was a fool to lose you. He didn't lose me, I corrected gently. He never really had me. Not once I learned the truth. She nodded, something like respect in her eyes. Fair enough. Life moved forward. The nonprofit grew. Seraphine had joined the team and was brilliant at outreach and communications. We had helped dozens of women already, providing them with legal resources, financial planning, safe housing. We had turned our pain into purpose. Paloma and I met for brunch every Sunday, a tradition we had started during the darkest days of my planning. She told me once, over mimosas and eggs Benedict, that she had never been more proud of anyone in her life. "You could have just walked away," she said. "When you found out about the affair, you could have just ended the engagement and moved on." "Why didn't you?" "Because walking away would have left him with everything," I explained. "His money, his reputation, his freedom to hurt someone else. I wanted him to understand that actions have consequences. I wanted justice." "Revenge, you mean," Paloma said with a slight smile. "Justice. Revenge." I shrugged. "Sometimes they're the same thing." She raised her mimosa glass. "To justice, then. To justice," I agreed, clinking my glass against hers. A year after the wedding that had shocked a city, I was sitting in my office when I received an unexpected email. It was from Dashiell's mother, a woman who had frozen me out completely after the scandal. The email was brief and formal, but the meaning was clear. She wanted to meet. I debated ignoring it. I owed the Thornfield family nothing. But curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed to have coffee with her. We met at a high-end hotel restaurant, all white tablecloths and silver service. She was waiting when I arrived, looking as imperious as ever in her pearls and designer suit. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I replied honestly. 2 years after the infamous wedding, I was giving a speech at a fundraiser for the nonprofit. The ballroom was filled with donors and supporters, people who believed in what we were doing. As I stood at the podium, looking out at all those faces, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not for what had happened to me, but for what I had built from the ashes of it. I told them a version of my story, keeping some details private, but explaining how I had learned the hard way that knowledge is power, that documentation is protection, that women deserve better than to be used and discarded. I talked about the importance of financial independence, of understanding your legal rights, of having resources when you need to leave. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. People stood. Some were crying. After the speech, a young woman approached me. She couldn't have been more than 25, with nervous eyes and shaking hands. "Thank you," she said, "for sharing your story. I'm in a situation similar to what you described, and I didn't know what to do. But now I do." I reached out and squeezed her hand. "You have resources now. We'll help you. You're not alone." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "That's what I needed to hear, that I'm not alone." "You're not," I promised. "None of us are alone. Not anymore." That moment, that connection, meant more to me than any amount of money or revenge ever could. This was what mattered. Helping others. Making sure no one else had to feel as lost and betrayed as I had felt. Turning pain into purpose. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Paloma found me on the balcony, looking out over the city lights. "You did good tonight," she said, joining me at the railing. "We did good," I corrected. "None of this would exist without you." She had been there every step of the way, from the first moment I discovered Dashiell's betrayal to the planning of the wedding trap to the founding of the nonprofit. She was more than my best friend. She was my sister in all the ways that mattered. "Do you ever regret it?" Paloma asked. "Going through with the wedding instead of just walking away?" I thought about that. Did I regret it? The answer came easily. "No," I said. "If I had walked away, Dashiell would have found another woman to use for his trust fund. He would have hurt someone else. This way, at least there were consequences. At least he learned that people aren't disposable." "And you got justice," Paloma added. "And I got justice," I agreed. "Plus $30 million to help other women. That's not nothing. That's everything," Paloma said firmly. "You turned something ugly into something beautiful. Most people can't do that." We stood there in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe and pulse below us. Somewhere out there, Dashiell was probably at a bar, drinking expensive whiskey and wondering where it all went wrong. Somewhere out there, Seraphine was building a new life, making amends for her own mistakes. And here I was, on a balcony, surrounded by people who believed in the work we were doing, who wanted to make the world better for women who needed help. I had started this journey in pain, in betrayal, in a desperate need for justice. But I was ending it in peace, in purpose, in the knowledge that I had taken the worst thing that ever happened to me and transformed it into the best thing I had ever done. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.